to the Boropolis podcast. As usual, I am joined with Nathan, and well, Boro are all of a sudden seriously looking over their shoulders. Another defeat against lower league opposition. And well, if last week's podcast was a negative one, I can't see it getting any more positive in this episode, Nathan. I mean, we're getting into quite worrying territory now ahead of a week of some pretty difficult games, in all honesty.
Yeah, it's never mind the Boropolis podcast. Welcome back to the Doom and Gloom podcast. Dear God,
Yeah,
it's not looking good at all. Yeah, as you mentioned, looking over our shoulders, and you're seeing pretty much every side behind us showing some signs of positivity, some signs of picking up points, while you look at the league table and you see us sat in 14th and you think, it's okay, we're 14th, we're fine. I'm absolutely shitting it, looking over my shoulder at sides that have been horrendous all season, and they're all of a sudden showing signs that they're actually proper football sides, picking up results, home or away, and we look just about as abject away from home as we do at home. So, yeah, I really don't know what to say, which can't be good considering I'm sat here on a podcast. But yeah, it just goes from bad to worse, week on week. And yeah, another defeat. But the worst part about it is I predicted the scoreline, I predicted what would happen, and yet still being able to predict it, seeing it happen is just as shocking.
Yeah, and I just want to take you back to last Saturday, Nathan. And for those familiar with, the places to go and have a drink in Middlesbrough, I'm sure you'll all be aware of Baker Street. Me and Nathan were sat on Baker Street at approximately, I'd say around 1:30 last Saturday. And obviously, after the positivity of the Leicester result the week prior, I said to Nathan, do you know what? I know we're not quite dead and buried, but we've got a really good result against Leicester. If we could beat Plymouth today, and then you look at the fixtures coming up, and if you can beat Plymouth, Stoke look a mess, go there and beat them, and then you look at that Norwich game, and it would be a great opportunity to take some points and gain on a team in and around those playoff spots. And now look at the position we're in. I mean, it has really fallen off a cliff. The wheels have come off in such a rapid time frame, really. I don't know how we've reached this stage, and I dread to think what stage we could be at by next week, Nathan. But Stoke yesterday, there was all sorts of rallying cries. They were getting ex-club legends, John Walters, to do motivational speeches that they were putting out on socials. There was talk that if Stoke lost the game, that Schumacher was going to lose his job and ironically be replaced by Tony Pulis. I mean, yesterday, had Middlesbrough have got the first goal in the game, probably would have been quite a nice day, because that crowd would have turned very, very quickly. And even though I'm fully aware of typical Boro, and I have been, and we've seen it so many times, even in our relatively, by all accounts, short spell supporting Middlesbrough, when you consider some people have been supporting this club and been getting put through all sorts over the years for a lot longer than me and you have, Nathan. But yeah, I thought, surely we won't go there and put up a performance as bad as what we saw against Plymouth. And I actually think we may have performed worse.
Yeah, incredible. We had a couple of half chances, I suppose, in the first 20 or so minutes. McGree has the chance with Thomas cutting it back. He takes his first touch, which sort of sets him ahead of the defender, and it's probably a 50-50 with the goalkeeper to get there, and he doesn't get there quick enough. And then obviously the ball over the top for Lath, and he gets himself round Everson and sort of tries to direct a shot on goal, but it's just rolling, and there's a defender there to, I suppose, clear it off the line, but it wasn't as dramatic as that. But yeah, we just, even though we had those couple of chances, the best chance of the 20 minutes falls to Stoke. That millionaire, I can't even say his name. Anyway, he got played through after a mistake from Barlasser, giving the ball away on the edge of our own box. Shock horror. And yeah, should have scored. Was probably no more than 10 yards out. Full goal to aim at, and he blazes it over the bar. Don't know how he's missed. Just to prove the point on XG as an argument as well. Had a look at the XG in the first half, and ours was more than Stokes, despite that chance being by far and away the best chance of the first half before the goal. And yeah, was only given 0.3 XG. Fair enough. I don't understand how you can rate that 0.3. But there we are. Yeah, and obviously Stoke started to grow into the game. Listening to the BBC T's commentary, commentator said that Boro were going to get a goal before half time. Don't know what game he was watching, if I'm honest. But yeah, then the goal comes, big punt forwards, and Ayling is just calamitous for this goal.
He's a defending, isn't it?
Misjudges the bounce of the ball, tries to recover, gets just bodied out the way by Jung Ho, and yeah, in fairness to him, it's a good finish. Drills it low and hard into that near corner, and yeah, once again, as we spoke about week on week, Borough concede the first goal of the game, and if Borough concede the first goal, they usually get knocked from the game. Just to throw you a stat out for you, Chris, that I researched before this podcast. In the last 9 league games, so we've played 9 league games since the 1st of January, Borough have conceded the first goal in 6 of them. And yeah, I've mentioned, we look like getting nothing out of the games when we concede first. So yeah, from that goal being scored on minute 40, just sat back and thought, yeah, game done. Game well and truly done.
Yeah. I mean, when that first goal went in, you did sort of think, well, that's us now. And I mean, that's a really worrying sign. And just going back a little bit, obviously we've spoken of the first goal and the couple of chances that Stoke had and should have been in front with. But yeah, Nathan, just going back a little bit in regards to the team selection, obviously good to see Senny Dieng back in the team. The conversation last week surrounding Luke Thomas clearly wasn't heard in the halls of Rockcliffe because he retained his place in the team. We did see Lath come back into the team, as you mentioned. He had a good chance in the first half. Sam Green would come back into the team. Matt Clark also come in and replaced Paddy McNair. Obviously, little change in midfield, but Carrick's hands are tied in that department, I guess. The good news is actually that it looks as though Johnny Howson's going to be back a lot sooner than expected. Over the next week, I think he's going to start training again. So, I mean, that's a huge boost when you consider the way our midfield has been performing. I was going to say recently, but I mean, there's one common theme in that midfield, which really throughout the season hasn't been a level that you'd hope. Yeah, Nathan. I mean, at this stage, like I said last week, Lucas Engel has to be injured. I think that's the only way that I can understand the situation. Or, and I'd be absolutely furious if this was the case, but I don't think it will be. There's some sort of agreement with Leicester that Luke Thomas plays a certain amount of games, because otherwise I just can't see how he's being selected at the moment, and especially after last weekend. But I don't really think yesterday was a case of like really bad individual performances and standout sort of real. I don't know.
What
It's becoming a collective piece of rubbish, really. Performances week in, week out, and obviously Ayling makes the error for the goal. Yeah, okay, fair enough. But I mean, Stoke's second goal isn't really an individual error, but there's just nothing there at the moment, is there? And I mean, it's as if you're looking for cutting edge analysis, then I'm not sure that you're going to get it. But it's just there is nothing there. It almost looks as though the players have thought, and clearly earlier on in the season, like you said earlier, it did look that way, that we're not going to make the playoffs, but we're not going to get relegated, or at least get dragged into something that we don't want to be a part of. And that attitude at the moment is basically plummeting Middlesbrough down the table, whilst teams below them gain on them, really. And if they're not careful, I mean, it's down to 6 points now, that they're going to get themselves in a really, really difficult situation. And that's I don't want to use the phrase sleepwalk into a relegation, because I still don't think we will get relegated. I really don't. But sleepwalking into a bit of a battle, into a bit of a tricky situation, I think you could probably argue then, yeah, that's the case, because of the last few showings. Do you see anything in there that you would sort of be inspired to say, well, we'll pick up points from this game or that game because we've been shown this? I certainly haven't.
There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. Um, Still conceding shit goals and creating nothing really. Nothing clear cut anyway. Just something that I want to mention about this side at the moment. You saw the team line up yesterday, and I don't usually pick up on it because for me it doesn't necessarily matter too much. But we have a lad at centre half in Vandenberg who is 19 years old. It's his first season playing in England, and this isn't a mark on Vandenberg, because fair play to him for getting it. Being given the captain's armband yesterday, what does that say about the character of the rest of them? Because they're all shrinking. Every single last one of them is shrinking on that pitch yesterday. And I'm looking at the BBC T's interview with Carrick after the game, and okay, they brought the question to him about fight, and that Stoke stood up yesterday, and you could see they fought. And something that was harrowing to see yesterday was that when you go 1-0 down, the way you sort of expect things to go is that we'd be pinning them back in their half, trying our absolute best to get an equaliser in the game. And honestly, can't remember us being in their half in the second half of the game. It was utterly, utterly awful. The fact that we failed to muster up hardly a single effort in that second half. It's pathetic. And the this team is at the minute devoid of any sort of leadership, any sort of willingness to stand up and be counted. They just look like they're shrinking. Um, Without Johnny Howson, without Darrell Lenihan, without your Tommy Smiths, Hayden Hackney's even in this side, they just look like they don't want to be there. When the going gets tough, like it has been over the last couple of weeks, they've sort of looked to the ground to swallow them up. So yeah, I'm really struggling to see where where the next goal's going to come from. Never mind the next load of points.
Yeah,
I'm being dead serious. I think on Wednesday evening we've got Norwich coming to Riverside, and yeah, I mean I'm quite sort of a strange person, I suppose, in terms of I like to immerse myself in other teams' media as well as ours, and they are currently a couple of points outside the playoff places, and they make the point that their away form is what's keeping them out of those playoff places at this moment in time. Obviously, they're coming to the Riverside on Wednesday night. If they get that first goal, I think first of all, a lot of people just pack it in and call it a night because we don't show any signs of turning a game back round or earning a point from a game when we do go down. But imagine the confidence that'll give them, a team that aren't so good away from home, but have got a lot of confidence going into the game because they played the last couple of home games and won them. Uh, that they'll go away from home if they take the lead. It'll only breed more confidence. I don't want to say the atmosphere will turn toxic because I don't like the word, and I don't think it will necessarily turn toxic. It'll probably just be silent, but it could turn really ugly.
it could.
Uh,
It,
and going into the weekend after as well against QPR, they're currently below us in the table, but as mentioned at the start of the podcast, they're one of the sides in this division that, for probably the last couple of months, actually been showing something. That their manager that's come in there, Cifuentes, is starting to build something. Think something that's interesting to note about them is they've had one of the best defensive uh, they're one of the best defensive sides in the league since he came in. And considering that they're third or fourth bottom, it's it's not looking great for us going to their place next week either. And yeah, I just can't see, in all honesty, where we're going to even
where do we go? Yeah,
hurt sides. I don't know where we're going to hurt sides.
yeah,
I think I'm more concerned at this moment in time of just limiting the damage that sides are going to do to us, because sides are going to create chances against us if we continue to play in the manner that we do. We're asking sides to just come on to us, and we can't play around them because we don't have the players to do that at this moment in time. Players aren't up to the level to do that. Uh, and you're seeing today the approach won't change. As mentioned last week, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And this has been going on for months, months, this same thing. And we're conceding the same goals time and time and time again. Obviously, yesterday, even more embarrassingly, we conceded from a set piece, a short one that they just played straight from the corner, knocked it into Berger, one touch, straight out to Baker, and I mean, it's a pathetic shot goal, and it's still found its way into the back of the net.
yeah.
So, yeah, Chris, I'm not usually
I can
one.
honestly sense, and anyone watching this on YouTube or even listening, probably from the tone of your voice, can sense that you are genuinely getting quite concerned and worried about where this season's going to end up, aren't you?
thing is, it's 6 points away from the relegation places, and you hear the Championship fans of other clubs say that, well, you just need to get 50 points and you're probably safe. Can't see us really picking up many points in the next month or so if this continues. And as mentioned about our conversation last week, we saw this sort of next 5 games up until the international break as a favourable run of fixtures. It it really isn't, is it? We are. I don't think you could really, as any Championship club at this moment in time, pick a better fixture than playing us.
I think you've nailed it. And to be honest, after the Plymouth manager's comments last week, those comments about basically being quite happy about coming at the Riverside and almost sort of metaphorically rubbing the hands together and thinking, this seems like quite a nice place to go at the moment. It's not even Middlesbrough at the Riverside anymore. It's just playing Middlesbrough. Most managers will be rubbing their hands together. And when you're getting into that territory, then you've got to start asking serious questions. And like you say, listen, in runs of games like this, there's obviously going to be small sections that start to question the manager. And I will say on record, and I know you agree with me, that Carrick, there shouldn't even be talk of him losing his job at the moment. It's just he's basically banked enough credit and shown enough signs that we know that given the right tools, he can get Middlesbrough where they want to be. But at the moment, it is a little bit alarming for me that even with individual sort of substitutions and picks and just his tendency to sort of try and overcomplicate things, would it be unfair for me to say that his inexperience as a manager is starting to show a little bit? Is it starting to become a little bit desperate?
Possibly. Just yeah, possibly in terms of constantly chopping and changing the side. I mean, I know we've had injuries as a constant throughout this full season, but again, yesterday making 3 or 4 changes to the starting 11. We're in March. It should be a settled 11. Like we are, we've had a week off as well,
I think
so
that
it's not
another,
even resting.
yeah, that's another thing that's really worrying is it's not like it's a quick turnaround. I guess it is this week because we have a game on Wednesday night, but that's 2 weeks in a row now where they've had a full week on the training pitch to think of a plan to try and beat an opposition, and not opposition that the rest of the championship would at all be scared of playing. It's a Plymouth side which hadn't won in God knows how long away from home, and a Stoke side that are probably, well, were one game away from sacking the manager, that were in the bottom three and still are on goal difference. That is, I mean, it's fairly damning, really, isn't it? That no plans being able to be put in place. And do you know what? The midfield is a major issue. And I don't really want to talk about Dan Barlaser because he's getting enough stick. And to be honest, I think we've made our feelings clear. So it's pointless going round in circles and talking about how poor he's been playing. Lewis O'Brien, after his Leicester performance, I thought we might be about to start seeing the Lewis O'Brien we all thought we were going to get. I don't think he's by any stretch performing at a level which makes me sort of think it's largely any better. Okay, yes, Barlas is playing at a certain level and making key mistakes which are hurting us. But is O'Brien really bringing anything else? Even if you put Johnny Howson alongside him, which would obviously help anyone, Lewis O'Brien isn't really showing me any signs of sort of a player that in the summer, and he will be available, but I imagine Forest will want a fairly sizable fee for him. It certainly wouldn't be my money if I was Middlesbrough. I'm not going to lie. He's he tries to get his foot in. His work rate can't be questioned, but apart from that, I don't really know what else he offers.
Well,
And
you've got two midfielders there in Barlasser and O'Brien that don't necessarily want to defend. So they
yeah,
get pretty much walked past um, every week for the most part. And once again, it goes to show that it can't even really be just one of them in there. Without Howson and Hackney, this team doesn't tick at all. It's awful to watch, really. But on uh, the manager and just on the sort of situation that we find ourselves in at this moment in time. At the end of 2023, Middlesbrough were 3 points off the top six. After the Millwall away win on the 13th of January, we were 17 points above the relegation zone. In the 9 league games that we've had so far in 2024, we've won 2, drawn 2, and lost 5. As mentioned about conceding the first goal, conceded the first goal in 6 out of the last 9 league games, and we now lie 6 points above the bottom 3. And it's got me looking at Tuesday night's fixtures and Wednesday night's fixtures and hoping that teams above us in the table do us a favour and beat the teams below us, rather than me looking at the lower sides and thinking, oh, I hope they beat Bristol City that are just above us so we can leapfrog them. I'm hoping that sides below us get tonked because I can't see us picking up points.
yeah,
What a sorry state of affairs this has really turned into.
it really has. And I think, again, just on another point as to why it is so concerning, I think that the rapidness of the speed in which it has happened. I mean, as far as the sort of PR disaster and the season tickets have gone, you would have hoped that the sort of on the pitch um, goings on would have lightened the mood. And I think, we're all guilty as football fans of, even if things are going wrong off the pitch, as long as things are sort of going okay on the pitch, they almost get forgotten about a little bit. But there's so many things at the moment on the field, off the field, involved in Middlesbrough Football Club that is just, they're just getting it wrong on a consistent basis at the moment. And it's not a nice thing to say. It really isn't. Of course, I don't want that to be the case. I definitely do not. But it's just a common theme at the moment. The tickets, I mean, I'm not going to go into the whole 20 years celebration fiasco. There was a lot of people unhappy with that, but that's a whole different situation in itself. And then you go and look at the on the field issues, and you just think, I mean, like you say, what a sorry state of affairs that we're now looking at results for teams below us and hoping that. I mean, a few weeks ago, you were looking at Hull and thinking, oh, if they can drop points there and we can nick a win here, then it'll be. I'm now actively looking at fixtures and thinking, oh, I hope they do us a favour. I mean, it's just, it's been a rapid decline, and there needs to be an intervention. And I guess the only hope for me would be the lowest point of this season, without a doubt, probably up until yesterday, was that Sheffield Wednesday first half performance at Hillsborough. And after that, we put together a run, because during that first half, I thought, if I'm totally honest, I thought Carrick's days were numbered. And it did get to that stage. But I didn't see us even putting together a few wins or pulling ourselves out of that, even back then. I'm back at that stage now where I don't really see where the next points are going to come from. But I'm just sort of living in hope that we've hit. I mean, it might be a bit dramatic to say we've hit rock bottom, but we've hit a pretty bad level now where, I mean, can it really get any worse? I mean, that clip of Mick McCarthy sums it up, doesn't it? That you posted on the account yesterday. I mean, it can go on like this. I just hope it doesn't. And after yesterday's result, how it's genuinely a question of how low can you go, Middlesbrough? Because, I mean, Norwich and QPR up next. Norwich is a totally different game. Potentially, it might suit us more given the fact that I know Norwich's away form hasn't been great, but they are a better side in the division. And when we've had the ability to play a back five, it's been really, as of the last probably month or so since the beginning of January, the only good performances have come when we've played with the back five. So I guess could that be utilised against Norwich? I mean, that in itself is a sorry state of affairs. Thinking of rolling out the back five at home to Norwich, but then the four's clearly not working, and then you look at QPR and you think, well, I mean, are we going to Loftus Road to sort of just try and be solid and not get beaten, spring on the counter attack? Is that where we're at now? I'm generally asking the question because I don't know if that's going to be the way that we're going to have to go about things going forward.
So weirdly, I'm not so sure about Norwich. I think we'll get beat at QPR next week. No matter what, I think we'll get beat there. But weirdly, despite Norwich being higher in the table, I'm hoping that this game is a little bit more favourable for us. And my honest view is I know that this mightn't be how we might want to play going forward, but this is how I'd try and go about it. Just give up the ball. Just give up having possession against Norwich. Just let them have it. Sit in like we did against Leicester. Same as Leicester. Exactly the same. Sit in. You don't want the ball and just hit on the brake. Look at the. I mean, I know this was the conversation at the start of uh, the season and against sides that want to play higher. Laugh against Grant Henley and Ben Gibson. D and me, please, just give up the ball, put him up front, and knock the ball into the channel and get bodies up the pitch that way. Because I'm sick and tired of watching Barlasser and O'Brien pass the ball to each other and then knock it into Whelan and then knock it into Vandenberg and then knock it into Barlasser and then probably back to the centre half again and trying to work our way up the pitch that way.
I mean, that's quite a common theme at the moment.
Yeah. So it's at the minute, we are currently playing with pretty much our back four and two in front, and the other four ahead of that pretty much rendered useless because the ball isn't moved quick enough into their even the opposition half of the pitch for them to do anything with it. So if we're going to do that, just drop everyone in and break as quick as possible. I know that might not be what we want to do going forward. It might be slightly against Carrick's overall philosophy of how he wants to play, but we've had success with it in recent games, and his philosophy, which is keep the ball, and I think he's actually moved away from it this season with the left back flying forward, which is quite strange considering you see Hull try and do the same thing and you see them in the playoffs, but there we are. I just think that we have to give it up for now if you want to go back to it next season or even this season, but you just need to pick up points now, because we're in March. And honestly, I know this is perhaps a little bit rash to say, but I think the next 2 weeks decide his future or not. Really, I really do. We've got 4 games in the next 2 weeks before the next international break. You know all about Steve Gibson and international breaks. We have Norwich, QPR, Birmingham, which is our game in hand. If we lose that, my God, we are up shit creek. And Blackburn at home. 4 games that, look, as mentioned, we said that they are rather favourable. You've got some sides in there that are probably in a little bit of a similar predicament to us in terms of um, Blackburn and Birmingham, where they're probably hopefully safe, but not quite yet. And you best make sure that we're safe before they are.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, it it's often a discussion over the years from Middlesbrough fans that has been the hottest of topics. But again, you look at the nosedive of form, and you look from where it started and what's changed. This has happened since January. I think everyone knew at the end of the window that we'd weakened the squad really, but I don't think perhaps people sort of, and myself included, I'm not saying everyone else didn't know, and I did, um, didn't really realise the impact that moving on the big tree and Morgan Rogers would have in regards to just having different options in the forward line, but also 2 of the signings that we've made. And I've got to say, early signs of Luke Ayling, I was really quite pleased with it actually. However, with the benefit of a few more games to judge the signing off, it looks like a really bad bit of business. And you do sort of start to think, well, Leeds, who were doing well in this division, very well, really just weren't bothered about him. They were happy to just send him out to another championship side. And the same can be said about Luke Thomas. And I know that in certain circumstances, different clubs and different situations can spark someone's career. It can be the end of someone's career. But in these circumstances, and you look at Azaz as well, who yesterday started the game on the bench. I hate to use the word again, but it's looking like a complete disaster, really.
Yeah, it's something that I think me and you have spoken about, perhaps not on here before, but at the start of the season, after last season, you're hoping that the window goes in a particular way, where you're signing players of top quality. Obviously, we needed a slight overhaul. Signed 12 or 13 players in the summer. But you signed a couple of players in this season's windows from teams in your division that deem them not good enough. So what makes you think that they're going to pull up any sort of trees for Middlesbrough? They're not good enough for the top of the division, which we were sort of hoping that we'd have aspirations to be in and around. Turns out that at the minute they don't look good enough to be around bottom of the division. Really, they were poor yesterday. Ayling was poor yesterday. Thomas, wasn't sold on him from the minute we signed him. Gave my reasons plenty of times of him being past relegation sides for the last 2 seasons, just looks like he's absolutely shot in terms of confidence. And another player signed from Leeds that was deemed not good enough in Greenwood, who, as mentioned, as well as the other attacking players yesterday, McGree, Force, Lath, weren't in the game yesterday. So yeah, it goes to show what the actual sort of ambition of the club was at the start of the window, that they were going to gamble on a load of players, pretty much every player that they signed, gamble on every single player that they signed, and if 2, 3 of them prove their worth and come good, then, I mean, I'm not being funny, but one of them's already been sold at the earliest opportunity. So yeah, it's a sorry state of affairs, Chris, and I'm dreading not only next week and coming on here and seeing the league table and seeing what situation we're in, but in 2 weeks' time, on the 17th of March, we'll be at an international break with 2 weeks ish break before Good Friday. And yeah, it could be a really, really frightening position that we could find ourselves in. And who'd have thought it would have come to this? But here we are. They just continue to strike you down for every season, like last season, where we were good for possibly 1/3 of it, that got us into the playoffs. We were good for a third of the season. You get a season like this where you were good for 7 games, and probably for the other 30 odd that we've played, just naff.
Yeah, yeah, and look, there's a lot of sort of sayings in football, and I think one in particular springs to mind in regards to how Wednesday night's going to go when Norwich visit, and what I'm referring to is that football matches are often won and lost in the centre of the park in midfield, and if you assume that our midfield pairing will be Lewis O'Brien and Dan Barlaser again, and then you see the midfield pairing that started for Norwich yesterday, Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean. That terrifies me.
And that is literally their Housen and Hackney, the elder statesmen that'll stand up, show leadership, show some sort of heart and desire, and stand up and be counted. And then the star man in midfield next to him, who's willing to take the ball, drive forward, and offer you something going forward. And ours is a shadow of both Housen and Hackney, and both McLean and Sarah as well. So yeah, and honestly, Chris is going to be on BBC Radio Norfolk on Monday night. Please have a listen. I hope he doesn't melt as much as I have on this podcast, but it could feasibly happen. So it'll be great listening whatever he says.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna good friend of the channel, I suppose, Chris Reeve, messaged last night and said, "Oh, you're up for coming on Monday night?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to come on. Thanks for the invite," type of thing, but don't expect me to sound too excited because it's all pretty underwhelming at the moment. So yeah, that should be interesting. Obviously, as well as the midfield, Nathan, you factor in Norwich's front two. I guess Barnes plays off Sargent, so he'll be dropping in pockets where you're relying on one of O'Brien and Barlaser to pick him up. That should be an interesting one. But Josh Sargent, at the moment, I think he's got one of the best minutes per goal, minutes to goal, not per goal, ratios in the whole of England. So yeah, that should be another interesting one because that man is on fire. And just
Also, Chris, just to let you know,
yeah,
played 2 games against Middlesbrough in his career and scored 2 goals as well, both
well,
appearances.
quite ironically, and I don't know if you know this information already, but I'm going to say it on the podcast. So when Norwich signed Josh Sargent, obviously, yes, he's had his troubles. He played off the right a little bit in their relegation season and didn't really stand out, but he sort of found his feet now in the English game, and some may argue found his level, but he's scoring goals for fun, playing as a number 9. Guess who was the alternative had Norwich have not signed Josh Sargent?
Can't have been anyone in our side, surely.
A certain Matthew Hoppy. So, Nathan, I mean, could our own American Eagle be the saviour of the season? I mean, he's definitely not going to be. He can't even get on in the squad at the moment. I don't even know where he is. He's very active on Instagram. He loves posting stories of him in the gym. I mean, really, I know you said about Marcus Force playing centrally. I dread to think the way he performs in training, because he literally can't even get on the bench at the moment, and we're in the situation we're in. So yeah, just a random little bit of information there, but quite funny nonetheless. And then of course QPR on Saturday. You know, you've already said that you're expecting to go to Loftus Road and get beat. It's not been the most pleasant of away grounds for Middlesbrough over the years. Obviously, we're not going to go into complete details because we don't have information on the case, but Ilias Chair is still playing for QPR and scored yesterday. So I don't know if there'll be any sort of development on that situation, but by all accounts, QPR are sticking by him at the moment. So whether he, regardless of his situation, if you just look at it in terms of the football player Ilias Chair, a player that's caused Middlesbrough all sorts of problems previously in the past. I'm not looking forward to going to Loftus Road. I never usually am anyway, but this time, especially in the situation we're in, it feels like it could be a real day of, I was supposed to say day of reckoning there, but if you get beat off Norwich and go to Loftus Road and then get beat again, I think at that stage, alarm klaxons, if they aren't already, are seriously going off. But we've just got to hope that it doesn't get to that stage, really, Nathan.
Yeah, but it's definitely not out of the question that happens, which is the most frightening thing.
Yeah,
Um, and we always sort of have a laugh and a joke on here about playing opposition sides, and you always get that one player who always scores against you. Well, actually, QPR have got shitloads of them. Chair, Willock, Dykes, there's 3. So wouldn't be surprised
that's
for
all. But
Jack Callback, dear God. Um, yeah, just yeah, really not looking forward to the week ahead. If I'm totally honest, feel quite sick at the thought of how things could be in a week's time. Um, yeah, it's as mentioned, just a really sort of damning state that Middlesbrough are in at this moment in time. And honestly, if there were any positives, we would have mentioned them. But I don't think we can see any.
there isn't. There really isn't. I mean, at least Michael Carrick looked dapper on the touchline, even if we're getting beat. He's
Also, interesting point that I'd like to make about Carrick and his actual attire. So obviously we'd seen it on Twitter a good couple of months ago, and I'd actually like to see an updated version of the Carrick attire stats if someone can pull it out. But what I will say about Carrick, and it also links to a certain Premier League manager as well, which is Vincent Kompany. Obviously, last season, both of these managers' sides were performing pretty well. Obviously, Burnley won the league at an absolute canter, and we found ourselves in the playoffs. And both managers sported a moose knuckles black coat, and they both are still wearing it now. So leave it in 2022, 23, and pull something fresh out of the bag. Give me something that is different, that could perhaps ignite some superstition in my mind. Because, Chris, as we spoke about last week about my particular superstitions, the initial one that worked all last season decided that it wanted to die a sorry death at the end of last season and has continued on to this. So I changed it for Leicester and we won. And I changed it to the same thing as Leicester for Plymouth and we got beat. So I'll try my absolute best by Wednesday night to come up with something different. And if the unthinkable happens and we actually win a game of football midweek, then I'll be dressed in the same gear for Saturday, despite watching from afar.
Well, Nathan, not something we'd usually do, but let's talk about, we're talking about superstitions and different various things that can muster up strange little winning runs. I never usually ask you for predictions on this podcast, but I'm going to ask you for a prediction for the two upcoming games before our next podcast, Norwich and QPR. Give me some hope, Nathan.
You're not going to like it. Boro 0, Norwich City 2. Josh Sargent will score at least one. I would have voted for someone who doesn't score goals on El Hernandez, but he's actually out injured. So that's, I suppose, a little bit of a shame because he probably would have whipped his top off and done a lap of the Riverside had he scored. But yeah, I'll just go with Sargent, score one, and I'll leave the other one just to a randomer. And QPR, Chris, I think it could be really damning. I think I'm going to think that we'll get beat 2 there as well.
That's been the Boropolis podcast. Hope you've enjoyed all the positivity this weekend. Dear me, Nathan, it really is a sorry state of affairs, isn't it? I don't want anyone to be subjected to even listen to this for any longer, so I'm going to wrap it up there, to be honest. On a real positive note, of course, of those predictions. I mean, in all honesty, Nathan probably would have said the same, perhaps with just some worse scorelines. So, yeah, that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast. If you've got to this stage, then fair play. If you've watched on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. If you're watching or rather listening on audio platforms, please do rate and review the podcast. And yes, thank you ever so much, Nathan, for your time. I know these sometimes feel like therapy sessions for yourself. Hopefully you've got a little bit off your chest today. And yeah, hopefully we'll have some more positivity next time round. So yes, thank you ever so much for watching and listening. And that has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast.